Good day, fellow gardeners. In this video, I'm going to talk about 10 tips for successfully growing your tomatoes in containers for best yield results you get from them. Okay. Number one is start from the planting phase. Is you really need to use the right soil in your tomato plants in containers. You gotta use preferably a potting mix and mix in some compost with it. I mentioned that in my first video in transplanting tomatoes, and that's really important to use the right soil. Otherwise, your tomatoes will not uh, grow as expected. They will be stunted, they will be slow in growing, and they won't produce a lot of fruits. And number two is to choose the right container size for your tomatoes, especially for the indeterminate variety that keeps on growing. And you at least need preferably 7-gallon container. I use 10-gallon for best results for my indeterminate varieties. And the bigger the container, the more nutrients or the more soil it's gonna be there for those tomato roots to grow, because eventually they will occupy most of the container, and they will eat or consume the nutrients from the soil at the end. So the more soil, the more the bigger the size of your container is, the better for your tomatoes. Okay. And number three is location. You need to put them in a sunny location, preferably at least 6 hours of sunlight. They love to get exposed to sunlight for the energy that they need for producing the fruits. And so that's number three for the location. And number four, I discussed this in the first video, is when you transplant them from smaller containers to their permanent container, you have to plant them as deep as possible. Okay, that way they will develop the maximum root system that they can have until they mature. So the better the root system, the more nutrients they absorb from the soil, and the more successful, the bigger, the more yields you get from your tomatoes. So that's number four. And number five is to mulch them. uh, Reason for mulching is two things. One is to control the moisture of the container and make sure that it doesn't dry out that quickly, and number two is to prevent diseases from developing or infecting your tomato plants. And these diseases are like your late blight and early blight, and they thrive from over moisturing and like splashing of the soil into the stems or the leaves of your tomato plants. So to prevent that, when we put the mulch, it basically acts as a barrier from getting the soil splashed all over your tomato plants and prevent these diseases from happening. So mulch number five. Number six, we definitely need to water our tomato plants regularly, uh, preferably every day, but you can water them every other day. But as soon as they produce a lot of fruits and they reach a good size, they really need a lot of water. You cannot overwater a tomato plant. They just consume a lot of water, and especially during the summer months, when you don't water them fully, and you allow them to dry a little bit and then water them as they produce fruit, you can expect some cracking in the fruits from your tomatoes when they ripen, and that is caused by the inconsistency of the moisture that they get. So watering them regularly is a must. It's number six. And one other thing, uh, we need to water our tomato plants preferably in the morning time or close to noon time, but not in the evening. And that's another reason for disease prevention. so that we allow the leaves to dry out of the water that gets splashed to the leaves before nightfall, before the sun's out. We need the tomato stems and the leaves to be moisture free, and that is to control diseases from happening. So number 7 is fertilization. We need to fertilize our tomato plants on a regular basis as well. As I mentioned, they consume a lot of nutrients. They are really a voracious feeders, so we cannot just rely on the nutrients that are already available in the soil. We have to amend the soil with fertilizer. And one other thing, since they are planted in containers, the nutrients get leached easily when we water our tomatoes. So unlike when they are in the ground, so since they are in containers and nutrients gets leached easily, we need to support that by, or counter that with, a regular fertilization schedule. And in my experience, what works for me the best is a combination of organic as well as inorganic fertilizer. So for organic, I just use the regular vegetable tomato fertilizers. I use eggshells as well as coffee grounds as well, and I'll show you that in another video, how I prepare those homemade fertilizers. But regardless of what organic fertilizer you use, as long as you have combined the organic and inorganic fertilizers, that should give your tomato the nutrients that they need. And also calcium, worth mentioning is calcium. Tomatoes that are lacking calcium will have what they call blossom end rot, and it happened to me several years until I figured out how to sustainably prevent the blossom end rot from happening. Is put some calcium as you fertilize your tomatoes. They need calcium to really properly metabolize the nutrients and conduct their photosynthesis process for producing nice red delicious fruits. Okay, so that's number 7 is fertilization. And number 8 is, especially for indeterminate varieties, we need to stake our tomatoes as they grow bigger, taller. As they produce fruits, these fruits are gonna be heavy, so without a stake they would just fall and like break the stems possibly. And the stakes are meant to support the growing branches of our tomato plants. And in combination with the staking is, I found this to be very effective for me. It's like a stretchable rope that I tie as I see a stem that kind of like falling to the ground because of the heavy fruits that they generate. I just tie this elastic band or rope. I got this from Amazon, and I'm gonna mention this in the video as well, in the description. It works for me because it doesn't really damage it's not hard on the stem, and it stretches. And yeah, it just works effectively for me. As the tomatoes grow, I just tie them with this stretchable rope. Okay, that's for the staking and the support for using these elastic ropes. It's number 8. And number 9 is trimming your tomatoes, especially closer to the base. As they grow, they will have a lot of branches all over the place. And there's also videos about cutting or like removing this, they're called the suckers, the sucker branches which is basically branches that grow in between the main branch, because they don't really produce flowers, and it's just an extra uh, branch of the tomato that will consume the nutrients that you don't really need, and it's just a wasted resource in the plant, right? But I found that to be a little bit too time consuming for me, so I don't follow that rigorously. What I just do is I just trim some of the branches at the bottom that's hanging in the base of the pots, and that is to give some good air circulation at the bottom, and also for disease prevention. And I'm just going to show you an example here. Like for example, here I'm just gonna trim, like, yeah, there are several hanging branches of leaves right here. I'm just gonna remove those because they won't produce any flowers. As the tomatoes grow, they will just keep producing flowers at the top. So it's like that. Just trim some of the leaves on the bottom to provide some air circulation, and that helps the tomatoes to really thrive. Okay. Okay, last tip, for tip number 10 for maximizing your yield on your tomato plants is manual pollination. Okay, and how I do this is I use a vibrating toothbrush and just put it on the base of the blossoms of your tomato plants, and that helps pollinate these flowers, and gives a higher chance for the fruit to set on these blossoms, on these flowers. Okay, I normally do this every other day. There's really a no set time for uh, doing this. I guess like whenever you get a chance, preferably in the morning, just come out to your yard and pollinate your tomato flowers. And that's all the 10 tips for a successful container tomato garden. And I hope you learned something in this video. And next time I will be posting more tips and videos, so stay tuned. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.